Carter Walton had built his reputation on rescuing the most reviled, the most desperate, the most notorious figures in Los Angeles's underbelly. He was the go-to defense attorney for fraudsters, for embezzlers, for the con artists who'd burned through fortunes with empty promises. His silver tongue and unshakable composure in the courtroom had carved him a niche as both feared and respected, and yet when Grace Buckingham first walked into his office, face pale, hands trembling, he sensed immediately that this case would test him like no other. Grace was the youngest daughter of Reese Buckingham, the magazine magnate whose empire teetered on its own scandalous precipice, and she had been accused of orchestrating a financial fraud so intricate it read like a masterstroke of villainy. But in Carter's eyes there was something different about her terror, something that told him she would do anything to avoid prison. He leaned back in his leather-backed chair as she explained how investigators had traced millions of dollars laundered through shell corporations and offshore accounts back to her personal sign-off. The indictment was airtight. Public opinion had already condemned her. Scandal sheets thirsted for lurid detail, and Reese Buckingham, once lauded as an industry titan, had grown distant, unwilling or perhaps unable to intervene directly. Grace had turned to Carter as her last, desperate resort, and he promised her that he would fight with every resource at his command. But when he advised her to plead a long-term, diminished capacity defense, to claim she'd been mentally unfit to understand the magnitude of her actions for a sustained period, he wasn't simply reaching for legal gymnastics, he was buying time. Time to probe deeper, time to map the hidden architecture of this crime. That night, Carter retreated to his private study, the city lights flickering against the glass facade beyond his desk. He reviewed the bank records, the correspondence, the surveillance files, everything Grace had provided and more. And then he noticed it, a series of discrete wire transfers to an obscure account in the Cayman Islands, timestamps that aligned not with Grace's known expenses, but with dates when she swore she was attending charity events in New York. The figures were modest enough to escape casual scrutiny, but sufficient to seed suspicion, and the beneficiary on the receiving end was listed only as RB. He ran the initials through his private network, tracing them back to Reese Buckingham's inner circle, but every lead dead-ended until at last he uncovered the real recipient. Reese hadn't just empowered the extortionist to squeeze Grace for cash, he had kept a silent partnership with him. Panic prickled Carter's spine as the pieces fell together. Reese Buckingham had long ago learned to weaponize fear, and if Grace had faltered, if she had failed to meet his demands, the extortionist would not hesitate to silence her forever. In a city where secrets were currency and loyalty bought and sold on a whim, Grace's life had become a bargaining chip in a game too lethal to contemplate. Carter realized that if he continued as her counsel without intervening, he would be complicit in a murder he could neither prevent nor prosecute. His mind darted to the chilling reports of Reese's ruthlessness, the rumors of threats delivered at dead of night, the hushed whispers of ruin for anyone who crossed him. Grace, his client, was in mortal danger. And, because he had pledged to protect her, because he had convinced himself he could outmaneuver every adversary, he feared for his own survival as well. So Carter made a choice that would shatter alliances and redefine loyalties across the Forrester and Buckingham dynasties. Under cover of darkness, he reached for his secure line and dialed Ridge Forrester's direct number, a summons as unexpected as it was audacious. Ridge, the architect scion, the champion of Forrester creations, had once held Carter in contempt over a high-profile scandal in which Carter's client had accused Forrester Designs of corporate espionage. The courtroom battle had left both men wounded, Carter's client humiliated and defeated, Carter himself maligned and nearly disbarred when Ridge's testimony exposed his alleged tampering with evidence. Carter had lost his standing, his credibility questioned, reputation in tatters. Until the moment he scraped together enough goodwill to fight another day. He had never forgiven Ridge for the public spectacle, and Ridge had never offered mercy. Yet now, facing a threat that transcended old grievances, Carter saw only one path to salvation. His voice low and urgent, Carter laid out the full breadth of his discovery: Grace's clandestine transfers, the extortionist's looming threat, the lethal implication that Reese Buckingham would consider murder to preserve his empire. He explained that to safeguard Grace, and in turn protect himself, he needed Ridge's intervention, needed the tacit assurance that Ridge could leverage his Forrester affiliates to neutralize Buckingham's network. And in exchange, Carter offered Ridge something unexpected: his own admission of guilt, a confession regarding the evidence tampering from their previous courtroom clash, delivered directly to the regulators. Carter would accept full responsibility, effectively ending the long shadow of scandal that had hovered over Ridge's family name, offering them the unburdened truth in return for a guarantee of Grace's safety. Across the line, Ridge was silent for a moment so long it felt like an eternity. Carter pressed on, detailing how Buckingham's reach extended into corridors of power and how the threat was imminent: an extortionist with offshore hideouts and a trail of victims who had simply vanished. Exposing Buckingham's crimes wouldn't only protect Grace, it would dismantle an operation that threatened to destabilize the entire fashion and publishing elite in Los Angeles. Ridge, whose life had been defined by loyalty to his family and the integrity of his brand, now faced a crossroads: to enforce old grudges or to forge an unholy alliance against a common enemy. Finally, Ridge spoke, his voice measured, cold with calculation. He would consider Carter's proposal, but insisted on assurances. Proof of the payments, documentation of the extortionists' identities, a guarantee that Carter would follow through on his confession. Carter promised everything and more. In that moment, two adversaries forged a temporary truce, bound by necessity rather than trust, united by the imperative to save an innocent life and to confront a predator more vicious than either had ever known. Carter hung up, his heart pounding. He had risked everything: his career, his freedom, his very honor, on the hope that Ridge Forrester could deliver. As dawn crept over the city, Carter drafted the initial confession documents, his pen poised between contrition and defiance. He knew that once the ink dried, there would be no turning back. The regulators would swarm, Buckingham's empire would tremble, and the trial that awaited Grace would be unrecognizable. Grace herself lay unconscious in a private hospital wing, her ordeal having culminated in a fainting spell when the pressure grew too great. She would awaken to a world transformed, to a defense strategy rewritten in blood and betrayal. But Carter would be there by her side, not merely as counsel but as guardian, willing to sacrifice his own future to ensure she emerged alive. In the crucible of this conspiracy, Carter Walton had discovered that justice was never a simple commodity to be bought or sold. It was a force that demanded demands reckoning, that forced men to confront their pasts in order to protect the lives entrusted to them. As he sealed the envelope containing his confession, he felt both liberated and haunted, ready to face the consequences of his sins, and yet uncertain whether redemption lay ahead or if this would be his final act in a city built on lies. But for now, Carter pressed onward, determined to shield Grace Buckingham from the darkest designs of her father's world, even if it meant baring his own soul and inviting ruin. In the world of the bold and the beautiful, survival demanded alliances forged in fire, and Carter had just ignited a blaze that would consume them all. Hope Spencer's world trembled on its axis the moment the doctor's words hovered between them. "Congratulations, you're pregnant." Liam's tense brow, the worry lines etched by his recent ordeal, all of it faded for an instant as the realization dawned on Hope that the life growing within her was his. She'd come to the clinic under duress, the mounting pressures of Liam's precarious health, the family's fracturing loyalties after Grace's machinations had nearly destroyed them, the knowledge that Liam's successful Brain surgery was in fact only a facade engineered to keep him under control. And yet here, in the quiet examination room, everything changed. Despite her fear, despite the trauma of Liam's hidden tumor diagnosis and the secret deal that had ensnared them both, Hope felt a fierce surge of love and responsibility. The child she carried was the final gift of Liam Spencer, a legacy born in the shadow of deceit, but transcendent of it all. As the initial shock settled, memories of that night came rushing back. The night Hope had flown to Liam's side when the first signs of his illness emerged, when the world had seemed to slip beneath his feet. She remembered the vulnerable way he'd reached for her hand, the soft tremor in his voice as he admitted he was terrified. In the dimly lit living room, they'd shared more than words. Two hearts, strained by fear and uncertainty, had found solace in each other's embrace. They'd crossed a line neither intended, driven by raw emotion and the desperate need to feel alive in the face of mortality's shadow. Hope had chastised herself afterward, knowing it was too soon, that they both needed healing before opening their hearts in such an irrevocable way. Yet when she'd felt the first flutter in her abdomen a few weeks later, hope and guilt had woven themselves into a tapestry of longing and dread. Now, standing before the cold sterility of the clinic's reception area, Hope struggled to process what lay ahead. Liam still believed the surgery had been a success, unaware that Grace, her father's duplicitous actions, had orchestrated a sham operation to keep him off balance. The truth of his condition, the manipulation he'd endured, remained hidden. Hope knew that if Liam discovered the betrayal before the baby was born, the shock could kill him. She had to shield him until the moment she could no longer hide her condition. And more than that, she had to prepare for the unthinkable, the possibility that Liam's health might deteriorate despite Grace's ruse, that this child might never know his father's arms. Driven by determination, Hope confided only in Brooke Logan and Ridge Forrester. Brooke, with her fierce maternal heart, promised to stand by Hope no matter what. Ridge, torn between loyalty to his daughter-in-law Hope and the lingering resentment toward the Buckinghams, agreed to keep their secret and to protect Liam's well-being at all costs. Together, they devised a plan to delay any startling revelations until after the baby's arrival, to secure the finest medical opinions in secret, and to prepare a future for this child that transcended the turmoil of its conception. Brooke arranged for a discreet team of midwives and a trusted obstetrician, while Ridge repurposed a serene guest house at Forrester Creations as a sanctuary for Hope's maternity. As Hope's pregnancy progressed, every flutter of life within her brought a mix of joy and apprehension. She found herself whispering to the baby, sharing stories of Liam's kindness, his stubborn optimism, and his unwavering love for their family. The secrecy weighed on her like a stone, but she took solace in the small moments of normalcy, a shared laugh with Brooke over morning tea, a surprise visit from Steffi, who promised to keep watch, a silent blessing from Taylor that left Hope's heart full. Each day, she prepared for the arrival of a child who would carry Liam's spirit forward, even as she braced for the worst. Then came the day that Hope had feared and yet could not escape. Liam collapsed. Grace's sham surgery had failed to address the tumor that gnawed at his mind, and the cancer had spread. He was rushed back into emergency care, his condition critical. Hope sat by his side, hand in hand, as the monitors beeped and the doctors spoke in hushed tones. In that sterile hospital corridor, she understood that Liam's final moments were approaching and that she would soon face motherhood without him. As the surgeon's door closed behind him, she whispered into the stillness, "I love you, Liam. Our baby will know your love." Liam never awoke. His passing was swift, merciful in its brevity, but shattering in its impact. The world seemed to collapse around Hope. Brooke and Ridge enveloped her in grief and protection, deflecting intrusive questions and steely reporters. Only the inner circle knew that Hope carried Liam's child. To the public, She was simply a widow in mourning. In the days that followed, Hope navigated an emotional gauntlet: grief for Liam, fear for her unborn baby's future, anger at Grace for her duplicity, and a newfound resolve she never knew she possessed. When the time came, baby Beth Spencer entered the world in a flood of light and love. Hope held her daughter close, tears mingling with smiles as Brooke watched on, her own eyes bright with pride and sorrow. In that moment, the question that had loomed over them all was answered with a certainty that transcended circumstance. Hope would raise this child. But she would not do it alone. Brooke Logan, her mother-in-law and confidant, declared herself godmother and primary support. Ridge Forrester, despite his complicated history with the Buckinghams, vowed to be the grandfather Liam never would meet, lending his home, his resources, and his heart. Steffy Forrester, who had known Hope's trials and Liam's virtues, stood ready as an honorary aunt, promising to shield Beth from gossip and embrace her as family. Together, they formed an unbreakable circle around baby Beth, a coalition of love forged in tragedy and tempered by loyalty. Hope, now a mother, felt Liam's presence in every coo, every breath, every heartbeat of the child she cradled. Brooke guided her through the sleepless nights. Ridge supervised the nursery renovations, Steffy organized playdates and litters of soft toys, and Taylor offered counsel that blended compassion with medical insight. In the face of loss so profound, Hope discovered a wellspring of strength and a promise she intended to keep, to honor Liam's memory not with sorrow alone, but with the boundless love she would pour into their daughter's life. In the end, the question of who will raise the baby found its answer not in a legal guardianship battle or a court decree, but in the fierce, unshakable bonds of family. Hope Spencer stood at the center, her daughter in her arms, flanked by those who loved Liam and now cherished his legacy. They would raise baby Beth together, Hope as her mother and protector, Brooke as mentor and support, Ridge as grandfather and guardian, Steffy and Taylor as aunt and advisor, each role defined by devotion rather than duty. In this new chapter of the bold and the beautiful, life would go on, stitched together by love that survives betrayal, endures death, and blossoms anew with the laugh of a child. And through it all, Hope would remind baby Beth of her father's courage, his dreams, and the ultimate gift he left behind, the promise of a future shaped by love.